Welcome back to Switched to Linux. Well, we released the video on the Mullvad browser last week, and somebody asked a really good question in the comments. How does the Mullvad browser compare to LibreWolf, which, of course, LibreWolf is another hardened browser focused on privacy that is also based on the Firefox browser. So on this computer, I have both of them, and to my knowledge, I have not done any major tweaking. I believe I have reversed all the tweaking I did on the Mullvad browser. So if you doubt that, watch the previous video on the Mullvad browser, and that will let us know if I did. But as far as I know, I have reverted everything back. And also, as far as I know, I have not done any modifications to the LibreWolf browser on this computer. So I want to go ahead and look at their respective websites, and then we will look side by side at each one of these browsers to see which one is more privacy respecting. First and foremost, I'll say that they're both really good. They both have a lot of overlap, and there's just a few things that they do a little bit differently. Now, of course, the first thing you're going to see right now, I have the websites for each of them pulled up on LibreWolf, and you will see that I maximize the screen, immediately removing one of the anti-fingerprinting tools. Of course, by default, it loads up like this big here, and just like the Tor browser on like Tails, or the Tor browser in general, it's better generally not to reset the size. If you are going to reset the size, it is better to use letterboxing, as we saw that this one does. So let me go ahead and search for something, and you'll see Mullvad browser has this letterboxing, which does a pretty good job of preventing fingerprinting on a maximized resolution. To be sure, you can enable that on LibreWolf, and we will talk about that a little bit more. But I'll go ahead and break my privacy here by maximizing my browser without letterboxing and completely break the anti-fingerprinting that LibreWolf does. Just because I think it's a cleaner look to do that, and that's why I should probably turn on letterboxing. So first and foremost, what are the similarities? The similarities are that LibreWolf and Mullvad browser are both going to be based on Firefox. They're both based on the latest. They both enable anti-fingerprinting, and they both take what they believe to be some of the best overall approaches to maintaining privacy. Of course, the Mullvad browser is done with a partnership with the Tor project to produce a browser that is very much like the Tor browser, where if you're using the Tor browser as it is intended, every user who's using the Tor browser should look pretty much identical. And Mullvad browser is basically the same thing, only not using Tor, maybe using a VPN, but you don't have to. Of course, Mullvad browser, one of the main components is the Mullvad browser extension here. And the Mullvad browser extension basically just tells you if you're using a VPN or not, and some information about proxies. This is a browser extension that you can add to any other Firefox build. So if you want this, you can add this to LibreWolf should you desire. And that will be on the Mullvad website, if not in add-on libraries. So let's look at just the basic things that they do. First and foremost, LibreWolf eliminates all telemetry. They do not have experiments. There is not even the option anywhere that I can find to turn experiments on. No adware, annoyances, no unnecessary distractions, no pocket, none of that nonsense. Now, what LibreWolf does do a little bit better in respect to these two is it gives us a few options for private searches. So we have DuckDuckGo, Sirex, and Quant. My build here actually has Start Page as well. That might be something that I added to it. Let me go search. So you'll see that Start Page is in mine as well. I might have added Start Page, come to think of it. I'm not 100% sure about that, but that is one thing that I had. So you do have a few other options for search options, whereas Mullvad gives us DuckDuckGo and Mullvad Leda, which only works if you're using a Mullvad VPN. So go ahead and show you the search functions. All we have is DuckDuckGo and Mullvad Leda. So you don't have other options like Sirex, Start Page, or anything else like that. And so with that, you do have a few more options over there. Now, I did actually just pull up LibreWolf on my other computer, which I also don't think I would have changed. That also has start page. So my guess is current versions of LibreWolf do have start page as an option as well. They do have uBlock Origin, as does the Mullvad browser. What I should actually do is pull these guys up and just show some of the things that they do. Here's a list of settings and modifications. So let's go ahead and have a look at this. Of course, we're looking at the summary on LibreWolf. Let's see. So here's the anti-fingerprinting resistance. This is kind of why I didn't do it side by side, because they're really not similar. Here's the telemetry portion, browser updater, browser extension update. These are the list of the only connections made by the browser, and uBlock Origin filter lists. Things like that. LibreWolf does tell us that it uses uBlock Origin, and it does actually have a extra filter lists. We have enhanced privacy, hardening to maximize privacy without sacrificing usability. This does say that it will always get out the version no later than 3 days after the current release of Firefox. I do not know how fast Mullvad browser is going to update, because it is so new. We just don't know yet. And then, of course, there's the open source. Here is the full feature list. So this one might be compatible with this list here. So let's go ahead and have a look at our main feature list. Now, Mullvad browser uses a privacy-only approach. So basically, every instance you're using it, you are effectively on the Mullvad browser always using your private browsing mode by default. Now, here is the problem with that, and why LibreWolf does not do that is if you do want to save any data, maybe your own private website, maybe you actually have to use, in fact, this is a hilarious feature. On my web design computer, for whatever reason, I cannot get Firefox busting out of my firewall, but I can get LibreWolf busting out of my firewall. So I actually have Google cookie exceptions set on LibreWolf because of the work that I have to do with Google Analytics and other Google products for one of my clients. And Mullvad browser would not be able to do that. Basically, I'd have to always keep on logging in perpetually, because when you're using private browser mode by default, as Mullvad does, you cannot use cookie exceptions. LibreWolf specifically says it does not use private browsing mode by default, but instead, this does the exact same thing as LibreWolf, where it simply removes all history and cookies at closing. That's all private browsing does. The problem is private browsing does not respect cookie exceptions, whereas the way LibreWolf does it, it's effectively private mode, but you can set cookie exceptions should you want to. So over here, they say deletes cookies on website, only include privacy respecting search engines, DuckDuckGo, Sirex, which is why we have a few different search engines in there. Mullvad browser, as we said, it does not actually have anything else other than DuckDuckGo, which, if you follow this channel, you know that DuckDuckGo may very well be compromised. It is in bed with Microsoft. For a while, it was sending data to Microsoft, even though it was denying that, only came out clean with that when it was found. It stores all of its data on AWS servers. There's a lot of reasons not to trust DuckDuckGo. And so having that as our only option, Mullvad does lose a couple of points over there. So what will not be saved? Of course, anything cookies set in private windows will be held temporarily and discarded at the end. But again, there is no exceptions that are saved in that. So back to LibreWolf. It does include uBlock Origin with custom default filters list and tracking protection in strict mode to block trackers and ads. And we have strip tracking elements from URLs. We enable DFPI, so this is total cookie protection, and we enable RFP, which is the anti-fingerprinting. So the enabling RFP and enabling DFPI, I believe this is what these two browsers are going to have in common. We get a little bit more information about what all that means over here on Mullvad. All right, now moving on. LibreWolf is going to spoof your language to websites, always reporting U.S. English, even if it's not. And another feature that this has is it disables the ability to change themes. The downside is that on LibreWolf, everybody's going to use the light theme by default. The positive side of that is that everybody's going to look exactly the same. So you're talking about anti-fingerprinting, whereas Mullvad browser says it wants to make everybody look the same. They have left that one piece of fingerprinting open, and that is, does this computer use light mode or dark mode? And that is something that LibreWolf actually will block as well. So you can see force DNS inside WebRTC, inside the proxy when one is being used. And by default, it is on LibreWolf. And I do not remember if it's on Mullvad. We will look at that in a brief moment. Disable search, disable autofill, disable link prefetching, disable disk cache. I think a lot of these are things that they have in common. There are very few differences. We do get a list of annoyances: prevent window resizing from scripts, disable autoplay of media, disable search suggestions and ads in the URL. Lord forbid you've disabled ads. That's so horrible. I'm never using this. All right. Remove all distracting and sponsored content from the homepage. Remove Pocket extension at compile time. Good. Remove Mozilla VPN ads. Good. Disable Firefox Sync unless explicitly enabled. Good. And disable extension recommended. I'm sorry, I was reading that like this is the annoyances for the browser. No, I read that wrong. This is the annoyances it gets rid of. Awesome. All right, so and then here's some other ones as well. Completely disabling telemetry, including crash reports, Normandy studies, and personalized recommendations. No data collection of any kind. In fact, as stated in our privacy policy, we wouldn't even have the infrastructure to do it, making it impossible from a technical standpoint. Disabling Google Safe Browsing. This is one that is an interesting one. So you can turn it on. The problem is you have to have the company releasing it, that is these guys, would have to have a Google developer key as a requirement to build from source. And they're like, not really sure. So they've disabled Google Safe Browsing. So your chances of encountering eggplant have gone up on LibreWolf. It disables DRM. As it's a limitation of user freedom, avoids making unnecessary changes that increase fingerprinting without giving any privacy. And then let's look at the Mullvad. Here's a list of other changes. Again, most of these are going to be very, very similar. Mullvad, as we said, does enable letterboxing by default. It is an option you can toggle easily in LibreWolf. We have security levels. It does explain those. And I believe safer is the default. We'll have a look. We have the new identity button in Mullvad, which is good. That's this guy over here. Basically, that's just during browsing, it'll just clear out all the cookies and start you up again. Prevents anything from going over. So it will not change your IP address. You'd have to do that manually with a VPN. DuckDuckGo's the default. No search suggestions. And here is, again, the telemetry. These are the only connections it makes. We do not see a list like this on LibreWolf, but it should be very similar. Browser update. Now, here is one of the things. LibreWolf is distributed as a Flatpak. So it's not necessarily going to make a ping to LibreWolf. It will make a ping to FlatHub based upon what your individual computer settings are for updating Flatpaks. This is really the big advantage LibreWolf has right now, and this is simply because Mullvad browser is so new. And somebody had actually recommended or said in the comments as well on the Mullvad browser video that the big downside of Mullvad browser right now is the installation methodology. They did not like that you download the files and then just double click the thing because you don't see as much going on. I don't like that personally, but I understand that this is the very, very, very first release of this browser. It's okay. LibreWolf did the same thing. In fact, LibreWolf, it was infinitely harder to get installing. At least Mullvad, the basic computer user could download it, click the install button, and it works. LibreWolf was a lot more difficult when it first came out. Now that it is packaged as a Flatpak, it is available on a wide variety of Linux distributions without a real big deal. So you're not going to have that ping back to LibreWolf, whereas the Mullvad browser does ping back to Mullvad. Whether or not that's good or not, there's been some can you say that word? I don't think you can say that tinfoil hat wearing word that starts with a C these days on the tubies. But there is the CS about all the VPN companies are all just owned by 3 or 4 companies, and really this gives them a lot of control of seeing what's there. Of course, almost all the VPN companies have been tested in court, and many of them have found not actually collecting any data, so that is good. But at the same time, if you do not want a ping back to a VPN company, then LibreWolf is probably going to be your better option. There is the Mullvad for the DNS over HTTPS. That is something that we'll talk about that more in a bit. Because I do not like DNS over HTTPS. Both of these browsers enable by default, and we have a few other options, and we'll discuss those in a brief moment. No block uBlock script from Mozilla, and I don't know if LibreWolf's goes to Mozilla or if that goes to something else. And then certificates, of course, domain updates, and the filter lists, whatever we have those set up. Browser settings, no extension recommendations, no search engine recommend. Basically, it doesn't annoy you with a bunch of stuff that Firefox has been doing. Basically, both of these browsers are reverting back to when Firefox was actually good and not annoying. So, there you have it. There's Mullvad browsers, DNS over HTTPS, nearly identical fingerprinting. This is something that both browsers actually do. As I was digging in, LibreWolf does the exact same thing. It does the same anti-fingerprinting, and it is seeking to look exactly the same on everybody. Which one of them does it better? I think it's LibreWolf. And the reason is they explicitly block seeing whether your individual user is using light mode or dark mode, which is indeed another fingerprinted thing. Mullvad claims no unaudited features. We do not get any such claim from LibreWolf, meaning that every single aspect of Firefox they've looked at, we assume LibreWolf did, but we do not have an explicit statement. And then here is a differences with the Tor browser, not really relevant here, but of course the Mullvad browser and the Tor browser are basically designed to do the same thing, to look identical on their respective networks. Mullvad browser being the ClearNet, Tor browser being the Tor network. So that is basically how they both line up. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and have a look at the settings and comment on a few of those inside. Oh, wrong button. And let me see if I can put these guys side by side so we can see what's going on. So we have LibreWolf over here on the left, and we have Mullvad over here on the right. So here is your general setups. You'll notice that a lot of these are going to be the same. Now, what you'll notice here is that language and appearance here, we have the same. We have the Mullvad browser theme. We can change to a system theme, a light theme, or a dark theme. In theory, if everybody keeps the Mullvad browser theme, then that is actually going to be a little bit of protection that you have. The LibreWolf completely disables that, and I know I saw it somewhere in here, so maybe it's just not visible from our size or whatever else. So our other basics defaults here, this is Deja Vu Serif, this is Tinos. So the language display, so that's all going to be the same. All this kind of stuff is basically the same. And here's your... let's see if we can find... Looks like DRM is... Some of these could also menu changes based on slightly different versions, but so we'll see that we do not have an option, at least on this screen, for DRM, whereas we have the option to toggle it on. One of the things you'll notice in LibreWolf is, despite a few things like our theming options, a lot of the things are turned off, but you can enable it if you want to. All right, let's have a brief look at network settings on each. So your LibreWolf over here, this one is set. I think this kind of changes based on a few different settings, because I remember looking at this recently and we had a slightly different. I'm going to pull up LibreWolf on my other computer. Like I said, I don't think I changed these settings, but it's possible that I did. So let me have a brief look on another computer. Okay, so on my Arch computer, LibreWolf has the proxy DNS using SOC v5 is enabled, and DNS over HTTPS is enabled to Cloudflare. Now, I am not a fan of Cloudflare in general because it is basically taking too big of a chunk of the internet onto itself. And basically that means that Cloudflare itself is becoming a centralized net, even though its purpose is to quote unquote decentralize the net. Yeah, but it's all running through the same company, and that's kind of problematic. We also have the option for Next DNS inside of LibreWolf. This one here, you'll see the only option I have is custom. So that might be a difference. The Arch computer might be pulling this in from the AUR versus this computer's pulling it in from the Flatpak. So in this, it's using Quad 9. Again, I am not a fan of DNS over HTTPS. For the people who have asked, I'm going to give you a TLDR here, and I did a lot of different videos as to why. TLDR, though, DNS over HTTPS bypasses any local control you have on your network and sends all of those requests explicitly and in an encrypted manner in such a way that you cannot see or control what it does. This is why even I think it was either the FBI or the CIA issued a warning about DNS over HTTPS, because when you start implementing this inside of networks, you can bust out of firewalls, you can bust out of security, and if those servers that they're pinging to are compromised, you have no way of bypassing it. There are very few positives over using it, but I think the negatives overweigh it. Now, on our Mullvad, we do have a default Mullvad, and we do have an ad blocking Mullvad. So you do have the option to go with your default or an ad blocking option as well. So at least it's going to get rid of a lot of ad blocking, but DNS over HTTPS busts out of my firewall, which is way better than the ad blocking that we're using here. But each one of them has its own, and it would appear that LibreWolf's going to change based on your specific implementation. Looking at our home options, you can see the default here, Mullvad Home, homepage default, and I'm not sure what my homepage default is. It looks like it's just searching for the web. All right, so you'll see that Mullvad browser does get rid of a few other options that we otherwise have, so you can choose what type of content you want on the homepage section, either web page, shortcuts, recent activity. So you can turn those on LibreWolf if you want. You don't have the option on Mullvad. So search. Search options. Once again, the search options we have inside of LibreWolf are better. We have more options. We have DuckDuckGo. Some people consider that compromise. DuckDuckStop. So they have Sirix, they have Metgear, they have Start Page. Mullvad has DuckDuckStop and Leda, which you have to be on their VPN to use. So as far as your privacy respecting search engines, questionable. I would call LibreWolf the win. We have the options. Here is our privacy and security section. We have our enhanced tracking. So LibreWolf looks like it defaults to the standard. I think theirs is down here at the bottom. This defaults, this defaults to strict. This one defaults to your standard security levels. And looking at the other options, here's the exceptions list. So you can put in tracking exceptions list if you want to be tracked on certain websites, whatever else. You have that option. You don't have that option over here. So if you were to go in here and manage an exception for cookies, since Mullvad browser uses privacy only, your cookie exceptions, according to the LibreWolf documentation, are not going to respect them. Whereas LibreWolf, you can do that. You can put in the exceptions and you can actually keep those. Both of them, though, are going to delete the cookies and stuff. You can turn that off on LibreWolf, meaning you can accidentally make it less private and not realize it. Whereas, I can't turn it off. So with that, I think Mullvad might get the benefit in that you cannot accidentally turn off that setting, whereas LibreWolf, you can do that if you want to. This by default is never going to ask you to save for logins. You can enable it, and we do not see those options over on Mullvad. So Mullvad is a little bit better, again, with you can't accidentally turn on things like that. But those are the options that they will have as a difference. So Mullvad probably is, again, a little bit better unless you want that customization. If you know what you're doing, then LibreWolf is going to be better. If you don't know what you're doing and you're worried about accidentally hitting buttons that make it less private, Mullvad is going to be better on that one. So that's kind of depends on what your instance is. Mullvad enables HTTPS only mode on all Windows. LibreWolf does not. Of course, it is an option. Or that might be something I might have toggled that off, come to think of it, because when I'm working on website development on individual little projects on development servers that don't have SSLs installed yet, this actually gets in your way. So I do often turn that off on my browsers. That might be something. Let me check my other one on a computer that generally does not do any work. Okay, maybe it does because my other one on Arch is actually enabled. So that might be something I have toggled off. Now, what LibreWolf also has is a further setting system that is going to this is going to give you a few more options that we do not have the easy options to configure. You can change these things in Mullvad. They're just not as easy as a tick of a button. So LibreWolf does get a win for giving us an extra settings menu. You can update add-ons automatically or not. You can enable middle click paste. Okay. You can allow user Chrome CSS customization. This might be the only way to get rid of that stupid plugin button that's not on this one because I've not updated this computer in a while. You can enable IVP6. This is the enable resist fingerprinting. Of course, you can turn that off, or you can enable the letterboxing right here. So that's something that I should keep turned on mine because since I do like to maximize my browsers. You can enable WebGL or not. You can enable enable Google Safe Browsing. You can scan downloads, and then there's some useful links for individual things. So there is our comparative side-by-side of Mullvad versus LibreWolf. I do not think either one of these is definitely better than the other. I think each one of them has a lot of specific strengths. I don't think that either one of them has specific weaknesses, with that exception that it is certainly a lot easier to install LibreWolf because it's not a centralized thing on one company's server, meaning it's not, I don't know, maybe it's probably not as likely to be accidentally compromised or something else. But a lot of that is simply because the Mullvad browser is so stinking new that most people don't even know it exists yet. So there is my take, though. I don't think you're going to go wrong with either, and I would highly recommend, like I'm doing on this computer, install them both, because if you split half your browsing on this one and half your browsing on that one, any possible risk that somebody gets of tracking you down is completely obscured by the fact that you have two separate privacy respecting browsers to go with. So they're both good. That's my final analysis. If I had to recommend one over the other, I would probably go with LibreWolf at this time for the simple reasons. Number one, it is not tied to a single for-profit company. Number two, it is easier to install on more systems because mostly it's just been out for a longer period of time. And three, it has been out for a longer period of time. So they have a little bit bigger of a team working on things. They have a little bit bigger of a team recommending things back. Basically, you're going to get a little bit more mature product out of LibreWolf, and being as that in both cases, they are both really good. I would say if you can only do one of them, LibreWolf is probably going to be your winner, but both of them are very good, and the shortfalls are simply because Mullvad browser is so new. So there's the thoughts. Let me know your thoughts about these. Let me know of anything that I missed or anything I goofed up down in the comments down below. Thank you for watching this video from Switched to Linux. This channel would not be possible without the backing of the program supporters scrolling on the screen now. You can be a supporter at Patreon at patreon.com/TOMM or at thinklifemedia.com. I also want to thank the open source community who creates such excellent software that makes producing this show possible. Please remember to support your software communities. Thank you, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.